What's up, everybody? Stephen Diener here, UAP. Let's get the show started. There is a ton to get to here today for episode 211. So let's go. Yes, welcome back into UAP. Stephen Diener back with you here, as always, on the Unidentified Alien Podcast for episode number 211. And there is a ridiculous amount of information to get to here today. I'm going to try to do my best to fit it all in, not rush, give it to you as best I can as far as being comprehensive, but also not overwhelming you with the amount of information that we need to recap here today, because that is exactly what we're doing, which is recapping everything that went down, including the behind the scenes things that, just me personally, my experience at the press conference leading up to it and at the actual conference itself on that day. Some, behind the scenes personal stories there for myself, along with breaking down what was said, some of the biggest points that caught the attention and even some that didn't maybe catch enough attention. And then we're also going to play back some of most of my exclusive interview with Leslie Kean that I had with her that night after the press conference. I met her at her hotel lobby where we did a little video that we put up on Twitter and on YouTube, actually, where this episode is also going to be today. Shout out to everybody on YouTube watching there. So we're going to break it all down and recap everything that happened and react and explain a little bit of everything that went on as well. And we're just going to jump right into it with how did we get to the press conference? So before I get into the actual day on Tuesday, I just want to give a shout out to Eric Burleson, to James Fox, and to Leslie Kean for welcoming me into the circle, into the group that was going to be presenting the information that day, and to be, part of the, the group. I never already said that, but to be part of the group that was standing back there standing in solidarity with everybody that was speaking during the press conference. And, if anybody was wondering, well, how did I end up standing back there, standing next to David Grusch and standing with Jeff Nusatelli and Tim Gallaudet and all the members of Congress who were there? Well, it kind of goes back to when I got there on Monday. Again, thank you to Eric Burleson. Basically, it started there. He invited me to have dinner with him and James Fox and Leslie Kean on Monday night. For all of you who follow along on social media, you saw the pictures I put up there. It was a surreal experience that I'm extremely thankful for, and that I was honored to be there, and honored that Eric reached out to me to join them for dinner that night to kind of discuss, compare notes before the press conference on Monday. And that's when it kind of hit me like, I guess I really am kind of part of this. I wasn't expecting that, and I really didn't know what to expect, honestly, just to kind of, give my innermost thoughts here on how I experienced this. I went to just simply go cover it. I wanted to bring you the information as best I could. I wanted to try to get some interviews and bring you, just some live reporting as the press conference was happening. That was the original goal. And what it turned into was a pre-press conference dinner that I was so extremely privileged to be at with Eric Burleson and Leslie Kean and James Fox. And that turned into walking towards the Capitol with them and kind of scoping out the scene to see how things were going to be set up for the next day. And that turned into, the conversation of me being there with them for that press conference on Tuesday afternoon. And so thank you to them for, again, bringing me into that group, for bringing me into the fold there for this event, and for, hopefully things to come in the future. It's my honor and pleasure and privilege to be included in those things. And I did have kind of like that pinch me moment where I'm standing there next to David Grusch, looking out to the media, looking out at everybody who was there. By the way, a big crowd. Don't give in to the hype that was put out on social media by some people saying that there were only like 30 or 40 people there. I don't know how they were counting. Maybe they were there beforehand. I don't know. But it was confirmed by members of Congress that they hadn't never seen a crowd that big before. For any event that was being held in that area in front of the Capitol building. I mean, there were probably 80 to 100 people there, which is pretty significant for the little area that we were in. So, again, kind of a pinch me moment as I'm looking over to my left and seeing everybody standing there, and I'm up there with them for this event. And just a huge, huge honor to be a part of that in the way that I was invited to be. So thank you again for that. And thank you to you because, like I said before, I wouldn't be where I am with this show or with my ability to bring you this information, a lot of exclusive information in some cases, without the fact that you continue to come back and listen over the years. So I'm glad that we can do this together. And that brings us to the press conference itself. So before we started, I got to catch up with Jeff Nusatelli. And of course, we know him. He's a congressional witness. He's a friend of the show before even becoming a congressional witness at the most previous hearing back in September of 2025. And he's been on since then. So we're familiar with his story, I think, what he saw at Vandenberg and everything 20 plus years ago, and the experiences that he has had since as well. And I caught up with him before the press conference, and I'm not going to play the whole clip, but I did want to play towards the end here. I thought it was really important what Jeff said literally right before we walked in for the press conference. This was myself and Jeff Nusatelli, and he had this to say.
We need to destigmatize this topic so the people, we the people, not celebrities, can feel comfortable starting to share their experiences. That's what this is about. This is about the people. It's not, for me, it's not so much about crashes and recoveries and technology. It's about what this phenomenon does to us and how it affects us.
Right. So that human side, right? How does it affect us? And all those things you mentioned are important as well, but they all go hand in hand. Right. I mean, you can't have one domino fall without the other knocking it down. And that's what these things are when it comes to this topic. Is it's a collection of dominoes. One topic begets the other. And they're all important because they all lead to some level of truth categorically. Right. And so it was a great insight there from Jeff Nusatelli before we started the press conference. And I was happy to be able to be there with him. Awesome to be there with him and to meet the members of Congress and other whistleblowers that I had never met before, like Tim Gallaudet. Really nice guy. First time I got to meet him. First time I got to meet Tim Burchett. Obviously, we know Tim is a character and he's really nice and down to earth and just straightforward. So really cool to meet him. Got to meet Anna Paulina Luna again as well. Just, brief introduction. Didn't get to sit down and get some of the interviews with them because it was a very, I hate to say rushed, maybe rushed isn't the right word because that has a negative connotation to it. It's a very structured, is probably the better way to put it, a very structured process for the members of Congress because they had to come out from their chambers and then do the press conference, answer a few questions, and then go right back to the Capitol Hill floor in order to have committee votes, which they could not be late for. So it was a very, kind of bing, bang, boom process. And they wanted to devote the time, give the statements that they had to give at the press conference, which were great. Eric Burlison, very strong in his statements. If you didn't hear it, by all means, go back and watch that part. And all the statements were great. Jared Moskowitz, I met him for the first time. Really great, down-to-earth guy. And they all find this topic important, which we're going to get to as well in a little while. Or I should say towards the end as I get to the interview that I had with Leslie Kean. They all find this topic very important and they devote their time to it because they do find it important. And even when I had dinner with Eric Burlison the night before, I actually asked him, it was great just to kind of, be on that human level. It wasn't an interview. We weren't asking each other, deep prodding questions. It was just nice conversation, kind of comparing notes. There were some of those deep questions in that, mixed in as well. But a lot of it was just kind of, let's talk on a human level without being in front of a camera or a microphone. So it was great to have that opportunity with all of them. But when it was, I was talking to Eric at one point and I said, did you ever expect to be in this conversation? Like, was this something that you were trying to be a part of? And he's like, no, absolutely not. He's like, this wasn't something I ran on. This wasn't something that I was expecting to be a part of. It wasn't something I was pursuing when I came into Congress. But it just kind of happened, right? You kind of fall into these things. And I actually told him, same with me. I mean, when I started my broadcasting career, some of you have heard me say this before, it wasn't like, okay, let me go up and start a podcast about UFOs and aliens. No, I was a sports guy. I mean, so that happens a lot. Same thing I found out with James Fox, Leslie Kean. I mean, none of us, we all had that in common at dinner, which was cool to kind of have that commonality. We talked about kind of our backstories together and how we got to where we are today in this topic. And the one thing that we had in common was none of us started out in our careers covering this topic. It just, we ended up going down a road that we didn't even know we were going to end up going down. And now it's something that we're entrenched in. And we all had that in common. It was really kind of cool to hear each other's backstories and how, we got to where we are today covering this. And it was completely unexpected for all of us to be where we are today in our careers covering this story. But that's kind of the way it works. That's one of those things where you are where you're meant to be. This is something that we're all meant to be covering, all four of us, and that includes the other members of Congress. They are actually, very interested in this and working hard on it. It's not just something that they're trying to put themselves out in front of to be UFO celebrities, which, like I said, you'll hear come up again during the interview with Leslie Kean that we'll play here in a little while. But as we got past the congressional statements, and again, all of them very good, all of them very strong, they made their points to the president, to the press, and to the American people that we need transparency. These things need to come out. The American people need to know what's going on. And they spoke directly to the president for the first time on this in a public manner to say, please, Mr. President, we need UAP transparency. We need executive action to get whistleblower protection. And we need to waive NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, in order for these whistleblowers to be able to come out in droves. There are so many behind the scenes that want to come out and talk, and they don't, because they know what's going to happen if they do. And if they can get that whistleblower protection, if they can get their NDAs waived covering the UAP topic, it has to be specific, not, just broad stroke, completely disregard all their NDAs, because that would, be very bad for national security. And of course, these are responsible people who are also going to know what to say, what not to say, as to not compromise national security. And that's also very important to touch on. You don't want to compromise national security, but we also do want transparency and disclosure when it comes to this topic. And what people like David Grusch and Tim Gallaudet and Jeff Nusatelli, the things that they have been able to talk about and still want to talk about, but because there are things that are still within their their classification guidelines that would make their lives even more uncomfortable and more of a living hell than it has been ever since they came out publicly. Matthew Brown, Dylan Borland, all these people who have come out to speak, they've been going through a lot. So we don't take it lightly what they're doing. And that was the kind of thing that the congressional members wanted to get across. And I think they did very well. So hopefully more things down the line, as Anna Paulina Luna also discussed, and so did Eric Burleson, that they are going to be speaking with the Trump's advisors. They're going to have White House meetings to discuss those types of things, to try to push the ball down the field with UAP disclosure and this call to action. That was the theme for this press conference, which, by the way, was put on by James Fox and Leslie Kean. They brought this to Eric Burleson, and they put this all together masterfully with the PR firm called 42 West. So shout out to them as well. The way that this all came together, I got to see behind the scenes. I wouldn't want to do it. Let me just put it that way. It was a ton of work, and I wouldn't want to do it. I would be panicking, probably having panic attacks and anxiety attacks, trying to put everything together that they were able to put forth. Was just incredible. And they did it for you, for us. So that way we can try to move forward with UAP disclosure. And it was a very significant day in that matter. But also significant was when David Grusch got to come up to the microphone and give his statement. So we're going to pick apart a few things from his statement that I thought were very noteworthy, starting with this one here, as he spoke about how adversaries have approached the UFO topic in their investigations. Really, really good stuff here from David.
In my official duties, I was exposed to human and signals intelligence information concerning foreign adversary, UAP crash retrieval, exploitation and study efforts, adversary views on U.S. legacy program reverse engineering efforts, and U.S.-held audiovisual information related to crash retrieval matters, such as the recovered vehicles and the associated biological material.
So really big there, U.S.-held audio and video information about biologics and crash materials that have been recovered. audio. He's talking about that the U.S. government has evidence that he knows about that can be presented. That he just kind of threw that in there. And I think a lot of people maybe missed that part. And to be honest with you, until I heard that back for the fourth time as I was editing and putting this episode together, that actually snuck under the radar for me. So that's why I wanted to, and I was standing there. I mean, I was standing next to the guy when he made those statements, and that even snuck under the radar for me as I was literally standing there live listening. So I wanted to highlight that because that is a incredibly massive statement. One that I don't think we've ever heard before. Confirmation from David Grusch of U.S. held audio and visual evidence of crash materials that have been recovered and biologics that have been recovered. Hello? Like, he's saying they have the evidence and he has come across the fact that they have the evidence. That is a huge admission from David Grusch that, again, is not getting enough coverage. And I wanted to put that out here today to make sure that people heard that, because that's a really, really big deal. And then he spoke about the, how adversaries, with the information he's come across, adversaries, of course, meaning China and Russia specifically, that things that they have come across and what they're trying to do in their own studies when it comes to crash materials that maybe they have recovered in possible biologics. So it's not just, and I've said this before, and it's so important to stress again, it's not just the United States thing here, right? We've spoken about South America recently in some previous episodes, but this is a global thing. And especially when it comes to trying to be the first to develop weapons. Now, who's to say that the United States and other countries may have not already used different crash, retrieval artifacts to be able to reverse engineer for different technology? Of course, that is the assumption. Those are the theories that have been out there for a long time when it comes to different tech that has come out. It doesn't have to be teleportation or anything like that, or gravitic technology. We're talking about just things with computer chips, Kevlar, laser technology, fiber optics. These are things that have been rumored to go back to UFO crash retrievals and the reverse engineering efforts that were done from those. So just a kind of a really big statement there that was made by David Grusch to start off his, prearranged statements to the press that I thought were very much worthy of highlighting here today as part of this recap of the press conference. This was a really big part too from David Grusch, where this was actually a clip that I took on my own phone. I wrestled with this personally, and I'll say this because, and I haven't put this anywhere else yet, and that's what some of the things I wanted to do here today was give my own, backstories as I was there. As I was standing there as part of this group, I was starting to wrestle with, well, shoot, how am I going to record some different things now? Like, I originally planned to record part of the press conference to get it out to you. And I wrestled with this during the congressional statements, during James Fox's statements and Leslie Kean, which I'll get to those in a little while as well. But when David Grusch got up there, I'm like, I have to record some of these. So I just kind of bit the bullet and took out my phone and started recording, even if it was captured on camera. I'm like, screw it. It's too important not to record. And this was actually one of the things that I did record directly as I was standing behind David Grusch while he was speaking. So it may not sound as crisp as the other ones because this is literally just audio from my phone as I'm standing behind him. But this is where he's talking about how he's being sued by the Department of War and being investigated by the Air Force. Listen to this.
And this is why whistleblower protections matter. Through my federal litigation ongoing with the Department of War, I learned that the Air Force worked with an external agency to seek an investigation of me for alleged unauthorized disclosures punishable under the Espionage Act after I testified in front of Congress in 2023, discussing the results of my congressionally directed investigation in support of the first Trump administration. This should concern every member of Congress, regardless of party. To this day, I'm still fighting years of record withholding, administrative obstruction, and a prolonged effort to get a medical military retirement, but I still am not in a retired status.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. If you need to go back and listen to that whole statement again, then by all means go ahead, because there's a lot to take in there. Number one, just starting with the end where he says that he still hasn't received his medical benefits as retired military. That's disturbing, like really disturbing, and it's a crying shame. But those are the kinds of things that happen to guys like David Grusch who come out and talk. It's retribution is what it is. And then to be under, litigation, to be sued by the Department of War. They're trying to go after him for the Espionage Act, accusing him of breaking the Espionage Act. They want to throw him in jail. Make no mistake about it. They want him in jail, which is obviously scary for him. And then he talks about being investigated by the Air Force and external forces brought on by the Air Force, which is a really big deal. You're going to hear Leslie Kane refer to this in a little while when I play our little interview together that we did after the press conference. And I spoke to Anthony Williams about this, actually. He and I we're just catching up on a phone call a couple of days ago after the press conference. And I told him about this because he didn't really get to see a lot of it. And I told him about that part there. And he was like, whoa, hold on a second. That's actually a really big deal, because the military is supposed to go into their own funds that are paid for by taxpayers to use their own, essentially their own law firms or their own police or their own, EMS, things like that. They're not supposed to go outsource to those things in the private sector. And if they do, that could be considered a misappropriation of funds, which could be considered fraud, which is, a crime. So what David Grusch is saying there is allegations of a crime. And now he's not saying this. Okay, I'm saying this from what I learned. So I don't want to put words in David Grusch's mouth, but because this is a really big deal. What he's, what he said there, according to what I found out, would lead to allegations of a crime by whoever it is in the Air Force that has brought in an outside force, someone within the private sector, presumably, according to what he said there, that they would bring them in to investigate David Grusch, something being done outside of the Air Force's purview. They are paying an external firm to do this, according to what he's saying there. And I didn't know when I heard him say that first until I spoke with Anthony Williams. But according to what I learned from Anthony Williams, that's fraud. That would be fraud by the Air Force. And that is a really, really big deal. Again, all these things that have been flying under the radar over the past few days since the press conference, which is why I wanted to put them out here in the public and shine a light on these here today in this recap. And these are dangerous things. It's uncomfortable for me to talk about these things. This stuff is dangerous for me to talk about. I want that to be known. And it is uncomfortable for me to talk about it. But to shy away from it, I wouldn't be able to look myself in the mirror. I have to talk about these things. There's no point in me going to these events. There's no point in me being asked, being invited into, these groups with James Fox and Leslie Kane and Eric Burleston and everyone who was there, where they invited me into the fold. What good is it if I'm going to be invited into the fold with these things if I don't come out and really do my duty to you within this process? If I'm just going to brush things under the carpet because they scare me, then I don't deserve to be there, and I don't deserve to be brought into those types of groups when these events happen. I don't deserve it. I need to live up to these things. And if I'm going to be brought into these groups at these events and hopefully I continue to be in the fold in these things going forward so I can bring you the best coverage possible, then I need to really point these things out. And it's a risk. It is. But listen, I'm an investigative journalist when it comes to this stuff. Okay. I'm an investigative podcaster / journalist, and I take that mantle seriously. And I have to point this stuff out. So if there is wrongdoing, if David Grusch is what he's saying there is true, and of course I can't prove that it's true. Okay, it's always decide for yourself here on UAP, as you know. But if what he's saying is true, then that's a massive deal. That's fraud by the Air Force, and that's really, really disturbing. If they're withholding benefits, if they are investigating him with external forces, his lawsuit that he's talking about where he's with the Department of War going after him for breaking the Espionage Act because of his congressional testimony, sworn under oath in front of Congress, where he makes that testimony. It's wild stuff. And these are the things that is the reason why this press conference happened to begin with, not only to continue to push the ball forward when it comes to UAP disclosure and calling directly to the president, but also to bring these things to light and to try to get whistleblower protection. so other people don't have to go through what David Grusch and the others that I mentioned have been going through. It's a living hell. I can't imagine. It must be a nightmare to go through this stuff. So we got to shine a light on it. And it's incredible. It was an incredible moment to be a part of at this press conference, and I'm glad we can recap it here today. I don't mean to get so dramatic, but this is serious stuff. Now, this is a big portion of the show here, and I want you to kind of bear with me because there was something that David, and this is the last part from David Grusch that I want to play, and I saved this for last on purpose before we get to the final portions of the episode with Leslie Kane in our wrap up here. David Grusch mentioned a document out of Australia that was declassified, and I had never heard of it before. So 1971, and apparently he was asked, if you could point somebody to kind of a beginner, right? If you could point somebody to something that they should read or watch, what would you point them toward? And he mentioned James Fox's documentaries, which was nice for James because he was standing right there. And I agree, his documentaries are great. But he also mentioned this document out of Australia. And here's what he had to say.
There is a declassified 1971 Australian formerly classified secret assessment that a couple years ago was put in the Australian National Archives. I encourage people to read page 7 through 16, and that was the nuclear branch chief of the Australian government discussing the U.S. cover-up and the involvement of the CIA back in the 70s. And that's actually a little-known document that is publicly available.
Okay, so you heard the background there. Again, if you need to go back and listen, then by all means, before we really dig into this. And actually, I lied. There is one more clip that I do want to play from David Grusch where he spoke about the different types of aliens that the U.S. government is aware of. But we'll get to that. Since I already started this, I'll stick with this portion here. But he mentioned pages 7 through 16 from this Australian document. Well, if you'll allow me, I will read this document, pages 7 through 16. I want to do this for you so we can all hear it together. In all honesty, I have not read through this yet, but thanks to the Disclosure Foundation, they actually put this on their website. So if you want to read through it yourself, and if you don't want to hear me read it, you can fast forward through it and read it yourself by all means. It's disclosure.org. And you can find the story that they put up pertaining to the press conference. It says congressional press conference calls for whistleblower immunity and full UAP disclosures. So if you want to read through, they actually have the full 17-page document up. So if you want to read through that on their website, disclosure.org, then you can do it, or you can just listen along here with me as I go through it for the first time. So I'm going to start in the middle here because at the top of page 17 is kind of cut off. It says, so starting off here on page 7, I'm sorry, page 7, not page 17. So starting off here for page 7, while Project Blue Book endeavored to reduce the official number of unknowns, in 1957, they claimed only 14 out of 1,006 sightings remained unidentified. The covert program expanded considerably. The government agency, almost certainly CIA, that had been collecting the data on UFO performance and propulsion methods during 1948 to 1952, presumably, influenced U.S. governmental funding of certain advanced projects. One project was the Canadian Avro saucer. Okay. A drawing of this saucer released in October of 1955 showed a typical flying disc as described in many UFO reports. The Secretary of the Air Force, D.A. Quarles, appeared moderately confident that such a vehicle would be successfully deployed by the U.S. A more astounding decision on the part of the U.S. government was to allocate considerable funds to investigate gravity and a means of controlling gravity, right? Wow. Despite the fact that science had not attained a level of competence to deal with either gravity or anti-gravity problems, and only theory that might be applicable was Einstein's unified field theory, which was still incomplete at the time of his death. The U.S. chose to support 6 universities and government agencies in an all-out drive to conquer the problem. It is significant that at this time, the current theories on UFO propulsion were a mixture of gravity control and electromagnetic propulsion. During 1955, because insufficient staff could be recruited for the project, recourse was made to an urgent appeal for theoretical physicists and mathematicians from AERE Harwell in the UK. The 6 gravity research centers being established were at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. Let me see. Okay, I was trying to get the abbreviation there. So IAS, Institute for Advanced Study. Princeton, so Princeton University, we get that. Moving on here to page 8. Again, this is all on disclosure.org. If you find it boring to hear me read, then you can go there and read it yourself. But I wanted to kind of put this out there together so you could hear it. It goes on, and of course, Purdue University Research Foundation as well, University of North Carolina, and Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which would be MIT. They look at their Gravity Research Institute in Boston. The latter institute is a nonprofit organization founded in 1949 with George M. Rideout as president. It was believed that to make a gravity motor, a gravity differential was required, which necessitated the discovery of an insulator, deflector, or absorber of gravity. By 1955, so this is interesting to read back on because we're talking about studies from 70 years ago, so imagine where we are now. But it continues here. By 1955, 485 essays had been written on this subject and awards totaling $10,800 made for original contributions. The scientists involved included Teller from University of California, Oppenheimer, and F.J. Dyson of the Institute of Advanced Studies, J.A. Wheeler and Richard Arnowit, of Princeton, Vaclav Halavity, of University of Indiana, who had worked with Einstein in Prague. Okay, very good. And Stanley Desser. The objective was to control gravity. So they brought in all these guys in 1955, including Oppenheimer, to help try to figure out, to crack the nut of anti-gravity. Okay. During 1955, the following firms entered into gravity and or electromagnetic programs. Glenn L. Martin Aviation, specifically Dr. B. Heron from Göttingen University, and Dr. P. Jordan from Hamburg University. I apologize if I'm getting some of these names wrong. Convair of San Diego, Bell Aircraft of Buffalo. Hey, Bell, we know them. Sikorsky Division, Lear Incorporated, and Santa Monica, Clark Electronics of Palm Springs, California, and Sperry Gyroscope Division of Great Neck, Long Island, New York. Interesting locations, actually. Very interesting locations. Such an intensive onslaught on the gravity enigma was entirely irrational from the standpoint of conventional science and can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real and that the intelligence behind them now knew how to control gravity. So what the author is saying here is that the only reason they would do this is because there really was something to it. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the U.S. government to fully support an anti-gravity program. By 1966, 46 separate projects of this nature were being financially supported, 33 of which were under the supervision of the U.S. Air Force. Okay, so there's the Air Force again. Although details of most of these projects have been kept classified, it would appear that generally they have not been successful. Work on gravitational waves by J. Weber and his associates under U.S. Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratory jurisdiction has been reported fairly extensively since 1966. During August of 1965, Project Blue Book received 262 reports, which was about 6 times the average number for a month and was twice any previous month since 1957. Wow. So they're talking about the uptick in reports there. Major General LaBailey, Director of Information, formally requested the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board to review Project Blue Book. The review suggested that the limited Project Blue Book staff and the official investigating officers did not possess the technical competence to properly identify the phenomena and that the university teams should be appointed to investigate selected sightings. This conclusion was supported by the House Armed Services Committee, which met on April 5th, 1966, in the shadow of a public four-way consequent to the U.S. Air Force, identifying the well-publicized Michigan sightings as being swamp gas. Ah, yes, the classic swamp gas. The Colorado University was selected for the task, and Dr. Edward U. Condon appointed to lead the project. We know the name Condon there in connection with UFO phenomenon, so very interesting to hear that. They had initial allocation for $313,000, and they later raised it to over $500,000, $525,000 to be exact. The Colorado project became discredited when Dr. Condon stated publicly on the 25th of January, 1967, that, quote, "My attitude right now is that there's nothing to it, but I'm not supposed to reach a conclusion for another year." That's an end quote there. The revealing of a memorandum outlining a method to trick the public, okay, combined with a general dissatisfaction at Condon's biased attitude, led to the dismissal and resignation of most of the staff under most of the investigations had been made, but not completely written up. The final report of 965 pages lacked coherence. Condon's conclusions were at variance with individual staff conclusions, although only Condon's conclusions were publicized. That's interesting. As a result, the Condon report, the U.S. Air Force closed down Project Blue Book. Okay, so we know that historically. And that's shortly before the American Association for the Advancement of Science held a special meeting to counteract the effect of the Condon report. The chairman of the special committee, Dr. Thornton Page, was on the signature was one of the signatories to the Robertson report. Dr. J. Allen Hynek, scientific consultant to Project Blue Book from 1948 to 1969, began his association with a conviction that all sightings could be conventionally explained. Even though doubts grew in his mind, he found himself obliged to support official U.S. Air Force public policy. Since 1966, however, he has become more outspoken against the U.S. Air Force attitude and has assisted to convene both congressional hearings and scientific symposia on the subject. Although initially supporting the Condon Committee, he became disillusioned and critical of it with the passage of time. So interesting to hear them go into the history here of the Condon Report and Project Blue Book and how Hynek kind of related to it all. It continues. It is quite clear that Dr. Hynek, along with many of the other reputable scientists, do not accept the U.S. Air Force explanation of misidentification, hysteria, or hoax. And of course, we came to find that out from Dr. Hynek himself and from Paul Hynek, his son, who has been on the show here, that, you know, he became really quite a believer and actually was on the set of Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Steven Spielberg, which is interesting to note considering his movie Disclosure Day has come out now. And he was a consultant on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So funny how all this came together. A few more pages here as we go to page 10. It says the Directorate of the Air Force Intelligence is the component of the Air Force that is responsible for the analysis of all official reporting of unidentified flying objects. At no stage has there been more than one part-time officer allocated to this task. Initial investigation of reports is often undertaken by a part-time investigator from nearby air bases. The Air Force admits that its interest lies solely in the area of air defense, and it lacks both interest and competence to consider the scientific aspects. A 1957 request for the Scientific Intelligence Section of JIB to accept UFO responsibility was rejected by JIB. So we continue on here. I'm going to skip forward a little bit because it is a little bit wordy. In general, the Air Force attitude has been guided by U.S. Air Force public releases, which were aimed at allaying public interest by denying the reality of UFOs. Let me read that again. By denying the reality of UFOs. Consequently, most of the Australian reports were given identifications without a great concern for rational correlation. Most investigators and collectors regard their UFO tasks as intrusions into their more legitimate tasks. As a result, there has been a negligible scientific analysis of the data, and most opinions expressed by DAFI have been largely reflections of the U.S. Air Force public attitude with present reduced staff of DAFI. Really interesting. It says if Australia is to follow the U.S. lead instead of following the public Air Force attitude, it would be preferable to allow the U.S. Air Force in CIA role of concentrating on gaining a knowledge of the power sources involved. However, it may be preferable to act independently of the U.S. and initiate a program that is scientifically sound and intellectually honest towards unraveling the UFO mystery. In such a venture, it may be worthwhile working somewhat closer to the public than is usual in the U.S. and UK. Wow. So I'm going to end it there because what this boils down to, and you can go on and read the entire thing as it goes into different sightings. Again, disclosure.org. They have this entire document on there. I don't want to take up any more of your time going through everything here, though, but it goes into Project Grudge in 1949. It goes into Project Sign. It goes into all these different sightings and all of the different projects that the Air Force was working on, that they were, all these different sightings, all of these different reports that they were denying, that they were trying to delegitimize. And this classification, this document from Australia, actually spelled all this out. And they talk about how the CIA was involved with helping to cover all these things up, and that there were legitimate sightings happening here and legitimate things that were being covered up by the Air Force and the CIA and the U.S. government to try to delegitimize these documents. These sightings, these reports that they could not explain. They flat out could not explain it, but because of, government control and fear about how people would relate to it, or how adversaries would relate to it, maybe retaliate against it, they decided to cover it up. So what this does here, what this document does, is really it digs into the origins of the UFO cover-up with the U.S. government, CIA, the Air Force. Again, you can go to disclosure.org and read through the entire thing yourself, but I thought it was important to at least get to some of it there. And that way we can, kind of form a conclusion on about what David Grusch was talking about when it came to those documents. Really fascinating to actually read through that and kind of get a synopsis of, the government cover-up is real, and here's how they were doing it. So those are the documents that David Grusch was referring to out of Australia. There was one final clip I wanted to play from him, though. Like I said, when it came to the types of aliens, this was the clip that I think probably went the most viral, and the coverage on this was vast. I mean, I saw it on Fox, I saw it on ABC. It's been all over the place digitally throughout all major publications, AP, Reuters, CBS, you name it, it's been covered. And internationally as well through publications like the Daily Mail and things like that. And this clip here was one of the ones that went the most viral. Grusch was asked by a reporter about the types of aliens and what he thought about it. And because you remember that had come out into the public more about the 4 types of aliens, meaning the 4 main ones that were being brought up: insectoids, reptilians, grays, and Nordics. And here was his response to it. And actually, I must say, it caught me off guard. I didn't expect him to answer it in such a direct, open way. I thought he was going to say, well, I'm just going to leave that part alone and let you do, you're investigating on that on your own. I didn't think he was going to answer this, but he did. And here it was.
I certainly don't have the compendium. It's a continuum from corporeal, bipedal type life to, what I would consider like sentient plasmoid life. But there are several that the U.S. government is aware of.
So, I mean, he went there. He talked about sentient plasmoid life. He talked about, a life, he says bipedal, meaning, of course, walking on 2 legs. So that would range from any type of bipedal life, which, of course, goes to all the ones that we've heard about. The 4 that we mentioned and much, much more. And then he even talked about sentient plasmoid life. We're talking about the glowing orbs. Okay. We're talking about these glowing orbs that people mention, and how it's theorized that we might be looking at actual sentient life when it comes to these glowing orbs, some type of plasma life form. We've just started that conversation within the past year, kind of coming to the realization that might be a thing. And then he just kind of casually throws it out there, and everyone's like, whoa, what are we doing here? And yeah, that was a bombshell from David Grusch. It really was. And I was shocked that he went there. So those were all really big things. And that's why I was actually shocked afterward, when the press conference was over and after the questions came out. Grusch didn't stick around very long at all. He kind of bolted as soon as he could. When the press conference was over and he answered a few questions, he got out of there. He was very uncomfortable. He did not want to be there longer than he had to be because he was worried for his own safety, quite frankly. So he wanted to get out of there, which is why, if you've seen the clip with him in TMZ, he's rushing. He's rushing to the car. He wants to leave, and he wanted to fly home, as TMZ, followed him to his car, asking him all these questions about disclosure. But those are some of the reasons why I thought this was a really big deal. And there are some people, predictably, and I'm not saying this in a bad way. If this was your take from it, then that's up to you. I'm not going to get on you for it. But there were some people who were of the mindset that this wasn't that big a deal. I didn't hear anything new. Well, enter Leslie Kean. So after the press conference was over, there was a ton of press, and they were interviewing Leslie. They were interviewing James Fox. They were interviewing Eric Burleson. Burchett and Luna had to get out like immediately to go to vote. Burleson had to do the same, but he was kind enough to try to spend a few minutes to get out of there. His staff were trying to get him to leave to get to the votes on the congressional floor, but he was kind enough to try to spend a few minutes doing interviews after the press conference. So that's why I don't have any direct interviews with them, because it was very hard to get in there. But Burleson has agreed to come back on the show here maybe sometime after July 4th. So I look forward to bringing him back on here. And I'm sure we'll have a host of things to talk about at that point after the 4th of July. But after it was over, again, everybody getting interviewed, ton of press trying to get their sound bites and reactions to it. And that was very interesting to me because, seeing that type of huge press gathering is really quite something for this story, where just a few years ago, international press and national press wouldn't touch this story. But that's the stigma being chipped away, and we're seeing that happen in real time. Even a group of 14-year-old girls were there, which shocked me. I spoke to them for a little bit, and I asked them, I was intrigued. I'm like, how old are you guys? I don't expect to see a younger crowd here. And they told me they're 14. And I said, you know what? I'm going to mention to you on this episode because I thought that was so cool and so unique to see the younger crowd. It caught me off guard that the younger crowd was getting into this, and they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, we're really into it. We watched Age of Disclosure with her mom, and we saw this was happening. We wanted to be here. We wanted to see David Grusch, and they took a picture with James Fox. So it was really, really cool to see the younger crowd getting involved with it. And so that was something that caught my attention. But again, I thought there were a lot of significant takeaways to this press conference, which we've covered here today. And that's what Leslie Kean and I spoke about later on that night. I met up with her around 9:30 or so at her hotel, and this interview took place. I chopped it up a little bit. If you want to see the entire thing, it's about 12 minutes long, and I posted the entire video on YouTube, on my UAP podcast YouTube, and on Twitter. So if you want to check it out there at UAP Podcast 850 for Twitter, you can see the entire thing. James Fox and Eric Burleson, thank you to them. They actually share this video on their Twitter pages as well, on their X pages. So it's all over the place on X if you want to see the entire thing on its own. But I chopped it up a little bit for purposes here for the show today. So it's about 7 or 8 minutes long. Myself and Leslie Kean, her reaction. Again, it was an honor for me to meet her and to be, brought into the fold with her and James. They were so kind to me to bring me into the fold. Loved hanging out with them and getting to know them. It was really kind of a pinch me moment, honestly. So thank you again to them for taking me in the way that they did. They're so kind to do that. And it was a pinch me moment to interview the woman who broke the story, who really kind of started the modern day disclosure movement with her New York Times article from 2017. So here was my post press conference reaction interview with Leslie Kean as we covered some of these topics. So listen and enjoy.
This press conference is not geared towards people who know a lot already. It's like if you on Twitter are really well informed and there wasn't a lot of new stuff for you, very cool. But this was intended to be for media who don't know very much, and just try to get the word out to a wide mainstream audience. It wasn't done for the people who already know everything. So I don't think it's fair to be critical of it because of that. And I know there's a lot of impatience. People want new information as soon as possible, but we have to realize that it's important to get to all the people who don't know a lot. And that was the intention here. Plus, it was to appeal directly to President Trump, which has never happened before on this issue, ever. Where members of Congress have been out in public appealing directly to the president. That's new. But
I thought so too. I'm with you that there was a lot of significant developments from this today, and so. But I'm glad you say that. I'm glad you speak to that, and to the people who say, "Well, I didn't really hear anything new." And actually, I do disagree with that though, because I like to think I'm pretty read in on some of this, and I actually was a little bit thrown off when David Grusch said that he's still under investigation. He's going through all this litigation with the Department of War, that he still can't get his medical retirement from the military. That's
the Air Force was investigating.
The Air Force investigating.
He's never said that publicly.
That was
before,
new, right?
folks.
That was the first time we heard that.
There's something new.
There you go.
Also, just the fact that David Grusch was there at all. He has not done any kind of live press conferences or anything like that.
Right.
It's really since 2023. I mean,
That's right.
Some interviews, sit-down interviews in studios or whatever. But,
right.
And it was really an effort for him to come. I mean, it was not an easy trip for him to make from Colorado, and you know, he doesn't like to travel, and it was just very difficult for him to be here. So I think he needs to be commended for even coming at all.
Yeah.
Rather than being criticized for not saying something new. I mean, please.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I totally agree.
Give the guy some credit.
With everything in mind, now that it's done, what's the one thing that kind of pops into your head where you say, okay, now I can relax because this, you know, example A worked out and I was really worried about this, or maybe it's a couple of things that now that it's done, you can look back and say, okay, it worked.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is, Stephen, the amount of media that came out was just phenomenal. Nobody, even 42 West, who worked with us to make that all happen, who's an incredibly
great job,
well accomplished, one of the best in the country, you know, public relations firms, and they care a lot about this issue. And they were stunned. I mean, they worked hard to get the media. Even they couldn't believe how many there were.
Right.
And I mean, let me just read you that, you know, Eric Burleson, just his staffer who we've been working with closely on pulling all this stuff off. Let me find this text that he sent. I mean,
it was the list was incredible.
Yeah. So his staffer and I heard directly from him too, that he said he was very pleased with it, but his staffer just said, my boss has reiterated he's never seen a press event more attended.
It's amazing.
It was a team effort. Yeah, the number of the members said they've never seen this much media at any press event they've been to ever.
And that's saying a lot.
So, you know, I mean, I don't know if there are many. I hope some people took photos of the media. It's interesting because all the photos are focused on us at the podium.
Right.
But when you looked out at the media, it was really stunning. I mean, so that was really, really exciting to me. And I think what everybody said, I loved the statements. I loved everybody's statements. I loved Burleson. I thought he was really eloquent and powerful.
Yes.
And, I was glad I got to make a point that's very important to me about the importance of biological evidence and not just focusing on technology all the time. That we need to, you know, we can make a different argument for biological evidence because it's not a national security concern. You know, you can't.
That actually is a good point. I'm glad you said that.
I really wanted to make that point, that I want the conversation to go more focused on that, because we can all agree that, you know, we don't want the Russians or the Chinese to get the technology from these very sophisticated, advanced objects, obviously for good reason. So there's a lot of secrecy that has to happen because of that. But if you have a biological specimen or a body of some other species that you can prove is not human but has intelligence and is associated with UAP because they were retrieved in a crash or whatever, why is that a national security threat?
That was another big point.
Shock.
Right.
And it's really proof that we're not alone, that should be able to be given to the whole planet, because it's not technology. There's no threat involved. Right. So anyway, that was the point I really wanted to make. But I was kind of sandwiched in between the members and Dave Grusch. So I was like, okay, we've said the members. Okay, let's get to Dave. You know, so I don't know. So I'm happy to have a chance to make that point again. It's really important to me.
It is.
I think, like, I was sort of thinking of it as, you know, when we had the 2017 New York Times story, the issue went to another level. Then we had David Grusch in 2023, and the issue went to another level.
That's right.
Because it then became focused on crash retrievals as opposed to just, they're real, which was the first phase. And they're not Russian or Chinese. That was the first phase. Second phase, David Grusch with crash retrievals and possible bodies. And so this third phase, as I'd like to see it, is more on the biology, because the second phase has all been about technology. Videos of flying objects.
Good point. Yeah.
You know, lots of videos and lots of new data, which is great. But you know, it's all focused on the nuts and bolts technology of the objects. And I'd really like to see an argument to be made for the release of data on biology, because how can you argue against it?
Yeah, it's a great point and very well said.
It offers proof.
I would say.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I would say. And that was a really strong point you made at the press conference. And I'm glad we got to bring it up here again right now.
Yeah, it's just something really means a lot to me. So I'm glad I got to say it today. And and all those members of Congress, they are not out to just grandstand. They are sincerely, I mean, I've sat down with all of them. They are sincerely passionate and committed to working on this issue. It is not for any reason other than sincerity, really.
Yeah.
I don't know what.
That's exactly what I have found as well.
They're very, very committed, and they really care, and they understand what's going on, you know?
Right. I'm
they're
with
working
you.
so hard on it. So
they are. And it's not for show.
Where would we be if they hadn't been, where would we be if they hadn't had their hearings?
Right.
Where would we be without them, you know? So let's give them credit where credit is due, you know?
Yeah, it's not for show. It's not for UFO celebrity. There's real work being done here.
There's real work being done, and it's also not for telling people who already know a lot something new.
Yeah.
It's about reaching a broad public so they can put pressure on our government to do more than what they're doing. So they can speak to their own members of Congress, put pressure on the executive branch to keep doing and do more.
Right.
And it's, you know, the people we really need to reach are the ones that don't know a lot. And that's where the mainstream media comes in.
Exactly right.
They reach those audiences. So,
and I think this was another step in that today.
I think I'm very happy with it.
Leslie, thanks so much. And to James Fox as well.
Thank you.
This has been a pleasure, and we'll talk again soon.
And it was great to have you there, Stephen.
Yeah, likewise. Oh, it's fantastic.
As a sign of solidarity was really meaningful. So thanks for being there.
It meant a lot to me too. So thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay, see you.
Yeah, again, thank you to Leslie and to James and to Eric. I know I started off the episode with that, but I want to say it again here towards the end, because the access that they gave me, the honor and the privilege that they gave me to be a part of this with them was something that was completely and totally unexpected. But what an honor it was. And I hope that we can continue to work on things in the future. Leslie did say she would come on the show with me for a longer form conversation. So I look forward to having Leslie on the show in the future. James Fox as well. I was speaking with him at one point, and he said he would come back on with me. He's been on the show here a couple of times, actually. And now that we know each other better, I think it would be a lot more fun to have him on again too in the future. And we can talk about actually something that he broke while he was in DC. The story about this Brazilian commander. He spoke a lot about Brazil and, of course, his work with Varginha. But now one of the commanders who was supposedly there during the Varginha incident in 1996 has come out to say that the alien body was recovered and it was moved. So that was something new that happened really just within the past week or two. And James Fox was working on that, as well as working on putting this press conference together with Leslie Kean and Eric Burleson. So he was juggling a lot, which was one of the reasons why he couldn't attend that little post press conference video that Leslie and I did that night. The original plan was actually to speak with both of them, but he couldn't make it because he was editing, and I don't even know what time he was done. So credit to James. We'll talk again in the future. But like I said, he did share that video with Leslie. So check out my Twitter, check out James Fox's Twitter, Eric Burleson's Twitter. They both shared it. So if you want to see the whole video, then by all means, it was really kind of Leslie to take that time, later on at night when we were all really tired, but well worth it to be tired. It was a good kind of tired. There was actually a point too, when you see the video, it was kind of funny. You really have to look to see it when Leslie is speaking with me. And there's one point where I kind of like lose focus for a second, and I look up and I look completely out of her field of vision, and I'm looking toward a hallway. And I had to kind of bring myself back to the interview because I got totally distracted as I looked up and I saw someone in front of me that I recognized. And I'm looking and I'm like, is that Dwight from The Office? Yes, Dwight from The Office. It was Rainn Wilson. And I mean, he's unmistakable. I mean, no one else looks like Rainn Wilson. And he was in the lobby. He was staying at the same hotel as Leslie Kean there in DC. And he was actually there. I don't know if he was there specifically for it, but he was actually at the press conference. I didn't see him, but other pictures showed up of him at the press conference. He's into the UFO topic. And I would have gone up to him if I wasn't literally speaking with Leslie Kean in the moment. I would have gone up to him as well and introduced myself. But I was like, well, hold on a second. Is that Dwight? That's Dwight Schrute from The Office. So it was just kind of a funny moment where if you watch the video, you'll see me lose focus for a second when I saw him. But some of the things that Leslie spoke about there, the biologics, I thought was a great point when she spoke about that was the point she made in her statement during the press conference, was that, and actually that did get picked up. That was one of the clips that went viral from the press conference, where she said that Rubio had been briefed by, different members saying that the U.S. had recovered biologics and they were in possession of biologics. And of course, David Grusch has said that as well. But for Leslie Kean to come out there and make that point that, you know, biologics doesn't have to be classified. If we're talking about just scientific evidence, that's not something that has to be necessarily classified, but of course it's still kept under wraps. And that goes back to what James Fox said during his statement, and something that Jeff Nusatelli says all the time, which is reality shouldn't be classified. And that's such a strong line that I wanted to reiterate here today, because they both did say that. And what Leslie was saying there about the biologics that she has been told about that have been recovered and that are within U.S. possession, just like David Grusch said as well, not only in 23, but also at the press conference a few days ago. They are reiterating that statement that we do have alien bodies. I mean, let that sink in. It's a big deal, even for people like us who consume this on a daily basis. That's a really big thing to really sit back and think about, that the U.S. government and possibly other governments around the world do, in fact, have alien bodies that they have recovered. And we have these bodies. We have bodies of aliens. I mean, that's world changing. And these things are being said. These things are being reported. And we're trying to highlight this and tell people, screaming from the mountaintops, please take this seriously. Even if you don't think it's true, at least consider the fact that all these people are being told it, all these people being briefed, all these reports, all these people coming out and saying that they are part of the programs. I mean, it's astonishing. It's staggering, really. If you really sit back and think about it, it's really quite something. Yeah. Wow. And this has been really a pleasure to sit back and recap. I really wanted to do a thorough recap. I hope it wasn't too much information. I hope I didn't throw too much at you here today. But I wanted to do the best I could, like I said at the start, to give you as much as I could in the most non-overwhelming form possible, because there was a lot to really sit back and a lot of exclusive stuff like that with Leslie Kean to really kind of reflect on, that I wanted to try to put all into one episode here today. So hopefully it wasn't too much. One little final anecdote to kind of mention here, relating to what Leslie said. One of the parts that she said where she mentioned, you know, I wish someone got a picture of the media. Well, that was me. I got a picture of the media. And what ended up happening was, and when I was saying it a little while ago, there was a part of me, just that, you know, that journalist part, that documentarian part of me that's been there since I was a little kid, where like I just have this innate need to document things, where I'm like, oh, this needs to be taken a picture. I need to take a picture of this. I need to take a video of this. This needs to be remembered. And that innate desire to do that was inside of me while David Grusch was speaking. I'm like, I know I'm standing up here and I know I'm probably on camera, but I have to take my phone out and document this. And I did, and I'm glad I did, because I did take a picture that actually was shared by Ross Coulthart. Thank you to Ross for sharing it, because what ended up happening was, after I spoke with Leslie, I showed her the picture that I took of David Grusch from our point of view, with all the media around him watching and listening. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's a great picture, Stephen. Can you send that to me? I said, yeah, of course, I would love to. And then later on that night, on Tuesday night, she ended up texting me and said, I just sent that picture to Ross Coulthart and he wants to share it. Is that okay? I said, of course. Yes, please, by all means, tell Ross thank you for sharing it. So he did that. He shared it on social media, and I don't know if he shared it on News Nation or not, but if he did, shout out to Ross for being willing to share it. I was the only one who had a picture from that point of view. And so I'm glad that it got put out there so everybody could see the gathering of citizens and media alike that were there. And it was just a portion of it. I didn't get the whole gaggle. I just got a portion, probably about 60% of the frame of the amount of people that were there to watch this, to witness that moment as it was happening. So it turns out there was a photo and it was mine. So cool stuff there. Just to wrap up here, this was one of the crowning moments of my career so far. And I don't mean to wax poetic here or get too, get too mushy, but I'm so glad that I was able to attend this. The way that this came together far surpassed any sort of expectation or anything that I could have ever thought that this could have been, with myself flying out there to DC from down here in South Florida to spend a couple of days away from work and from family, to go out there, put myself out on a limb to try to get the best coverage for you that I could possibly that I could possibly get. And for it to turn into what it turned into, which was this inside perspective with the congressmen and women, with James Fox and Leslie Kean, with David Grusch, and the whistleblowers I mentioned with Jeff Nusatelli and Tim Gallaudet, to be there with them, to be a part of the team for that event was pinch me moment. It was dream stuff. It's what I could only hope to work up to one day. And I actually was able to be there and be a part of it and to cover it from that perspective, to be able to bring it to you, to get this insight from an inside perspective is what I've always been able, or what I've always wanted to be able to do. And I'm so happy and beyond thrilled that I was able to cover it from that perspective for you, to bring it here today on UAP from that perspective. It is the crowning achievement of my career so far here on the show. And I hope to be able to do more things like that in the future with them as we continue to push forward in the disclosure movement. So thank you. And thank you to everybody involved that had me be a part of that. Truly my honor and privilege to be a part of it. So can't wait to see what's next here on UAP as we continue to move forward. In fact, we do have some fun interviews coming up, and an author named Simon Bound, who wrote a book covering all aspects of alien abduction and sightings. Really cool stuff with him. I spoke with him actually right before getting on the flight to DC. So I had that interview kind of in my back pocket, and I'm going to put that together to come out next week on UAP and so much more. Gosh, who knows what else is going to come up. Oh, I spoke with Jordan Flowers, actually. Jordan Flowers is from the Disclosure Foundation. I mentioned their website earlier. They did a great job kind of summarizing everything as well and putting out the press releases and the 17-page Australian declassified document we were talking about. Jordan Flowers is part of that Disclosure Foundation. They have a big event coming up, a really big event actually coming up in DC on June 25th in just a couple of weeks. I can't go, unfortunately. I won't be able to make it for that one. They invited me, so thank you to them for the invite, but I won't be able to attend. But I am going to have on Jordan Flowers from the Disclosure Foundation maybe in about a week or so to talk about what to expect from that, the next big thing coming up here in UFO disclosure movement, UFO world. That's going to be the next big conference and the next big gathering. So Jordan Flowers from the Disclosure Foundation will be on here as well. And so much more to come up on UAP. Thank you for following along and for coming on here today to listen to this. I hope, again, that I was able to put it together for you in a unique way that you hadn't heard before from this press conference. Big stuff, man. I'm so happy that I can be in the middle of it for you and with you. So make sure you follow along. We'll wrap up here today. Not much more to say. I think that's enough here for today. So be sure to continue to follow along wherever you get your podcasts, and whether that's on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or right here on YouTube for everybody watching on YouTube. Continue to follow along, subscribe to the show. Just search UAP Podcast and you will find it on YouTube or any other audio podcast platform. And follow along on social media at UAP Podcast 850 and all the big social media platforms as well. But with all that said and all that in mind, it is Stephen Diener here saying one final goodbye as we head out here for today. So thank you again for following along, for coming back here today, and for all the support. It really does mean the world to me. So thank you so much. So Stephen Diener here saying be well, and thanks. We'll talk again soon right here on UAP, the Unidentified Alien Podcast. Thank you. Thank you, guys. See you later. See you next time here on UAP. Thanks for joining me here on this YouTube portion of it. Have a good one.